Video game movies are the impossible dream for Hollywood. While are the next logical thing to adapt after the many successes of novels and comics, the amount of times you've all heard of adaptations stuck in development hell is ludicrous. The ones that escape, however, never really amount to much, barring a couple of notable financial successes. The notion of why video game adaptations don't work has been on my mind lately, thanks to the releases of Tomb Raider, Rampage, and even Ready Player One to an extent. 2018 is the biggest year for game adaptations since 2016, which saw movies based on Assassin's Creed, Warcraft, and Ratchet & Clank, to name but a few. So let's break it down. Why don't video game adaptations work? Well, for one, I don't think it's necessarily the choice of game being adapted or even the talent involved. Because even if you have talented directors, writers, actors, and more working on the biggest franchises, something still doesn't add up. I think a lot of it has to do with a lack of understanding of the material by all parties involved. The truth about most video game stories is that they're just window dressing for the many hours of gameplay you'll experience. Now, this isn't the case for every game story, but you got to look at the games that have been made into movies, and you'll often see a lot where the story just isn't the focus. Now, this may sound like a problem, but if you know the material well enough, you can really make something interesting out of it. For instance, two of my favorite video game adaptations are the first Mortal Kombat and Dead or Alive movies. Now, they are not cinematic high points by any stretch of the imagination, but they're actually pretty great adaptations of their source material, which is to say, flashy, entertaining fights with a basic pretense of a story. Sure, Mortal Kombat has a lot of lore to draw from, and Dead or Alive has a story, but you never really need to worry about it. You've got flashy fights and understanding from everyone involved that you aren't supposed to take it too seriously. It's why these two work as opposed to something like the Tekken or the King of Fighters movies, which either take themselves way too seriously or not seriously enough. But another huge part of why most game movies don't work is that it's kind of hard to disassociate the active interaction, which is the core of gaming. You can't control the pace of a film, but you've got some control over the pace of a game. That story you're supposed to be invested in, you could just put that on hold for hours and then to go sample many other stories, some of which may even be much more affecting and interesting than the main plot thread you're supposed to follow. Interaction is the biggest advantage games have over movies because you've got the potential for stories you can only really tell in games because there are things you directly interact with. The games of Yoko Taro, as an example, have stories that could never really work outside of the medium. If you've never experienced this work, Taro builds a lot of his games around the concept of the story looping. You'll go through the game a number of times, but there's always critical information present in each loop that changes and augments your understanding of the game's story. Now, without getting into really specific examples, they all coalesce with one of the core themes in Taro's work: how games tend to be centered around mass violence and how casually the industry treats it.
殺人鬼ですよね、100人殺したら、その狂気の沙汰だって思ったんですよ。だからドラゴンドラグーンの時は主人公の軍団を、この狂気の狂った人たちの軍団にした、正しくなくて狂った間違った人たちの話にしようと思って作ったんですね。
You kill a lot in the Drakengard and Nier games, and your reward for the sheer amount of killing you do is non-existent. The further you get into his games and the more you kill, the darker and more cynical his games get. It's something that, with the constant gameplay loops to achieve multiple endings, can't really work in any other medium. Not to mention the final moments in both Nier games don't quite have the same impact if they were to be made into anything but games. Despite all this though, I still hold out hope that it's possible we'll one day see a great video game adaptation without any weird caveats, because even with the many, many failures we've seen, we're still getting more video game adaptations, such as Ryan Reynolds starring in a live-action animation hybrid of Detective Pikachu movie, and Nintendo are teaming up with Despicable Me and Minions creators Illumination Entertainment to make a Super Mario Bros. Movie, and hell, one of those at least has to be decent, right? Right?